Have you ever thought to yourself, God, I've learned from this more than from school altogether? This might be an awesome information-packed book. It might also be a well-structured online course with a detailed actionable handout. But in most cases, it's an experience, an event, a situation, something we might experience firsthand. The question that persists though is, why is it like that? Why do I learn so much via what I have been through versus from the school? And even more importantly, how can I use this fact to make up for all those inefficient years? The answer lies in the art of independent thinking. There are many philosophers and thinkers that come to mind when one talks about an independent thought. In the end, objectivity itself is one of the basic tenets of being a good philosopher. But almost nobody has been so controversial yet so pragmatic in his teachings as the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche is an epitome of independence, courage, and controversy himself. In the end, how many people do you know who had come to the conclusion that there is no God because we have killed him by being born, and that essentially we are our own gods? Most people wouldn't probably get away with this, but Nietzsche did, and thus he brought independent thinking to a whole new level. In the following little series called The Art of Independent Thinking, we'll explore what can Nietzsche teach us about the art of learning via observation versus the conventional way. So let's break it down. There are two main concepts, memorization and observation. Let's start with the more familiar and often taught one, memorization. Memorization is a process where you take a piece of an information and basically hammer it into your skull in the hope to remember it for as long as possible, or, in the case of school, until the exam is done. This can be done many ways. The one that comes to mind first is usually repetition. A tedious, boring, and very inefficient way to learn. It does its job for passing the test that your teacher assigned to you, but that's about it. So why is repetition the most often used method when we try to remember something? Because it has been pushed on us by the obsolete school system for centuries and repeated to us many, many times. In his most well-known work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche writes, "He who writes in blood and aphorisms does not want to be read, he wants to be learned by heart." By this, Nietzsche implies that we shouldn't just read books or memorize quotes for the sake of memorization itself, but rather internalize and integrate the core insights. He emphasizes the quality of learning over the quantity. So for example, if you like some quote or definition that you would like to memorize, try to paraphrase it first. Describe the idea with your own words without changing its meaning. Not only will the insight have more profound and long-lasting effect on you, but you will be also able to explain the concept to someone else. Another form of memorization, a much more effective and durable one, is association. Sadly, this is the type that is taught and used much less. The funny thing is, on the first look, this method looks actually harder. In the end, you have to remember at least two things, right? No, not quite. The one thing that you are trying to attach a new information to is something that you know for a long time already. So the only thing you have to do is to find some similarity between the two ideas you are trying to memorize. Our memory functions usually better when there is a logical pattern and connection. Association works wonders, especially if you are of creative nature. It's also a very old and time-proven method used by many famous orators in ancient Rome and Greece. There are numerous other forms of memorization, but mostly they can be categorized as one of those just mentioned. The second concept is much older and natural to the human being. We call it observation. Nietzsche was as free in his ways of thinking as one can possibly be. He loved learning things verbatim without ever second-guessing them. He always observed and analyzed things for himself, keeping a distance point of view. In the chapter on scholars, he writes, "I have left the house of scholars and slammed the door behind me. Too long did my soul sit hungry at their table. I have not been schooled as they have, to crack knowledge as one crack nuts." By this, he disdains the mechanical, repetitive and boring activity such as cracking nuts or memorization. On the other hand, he venerates the more creative way of thinking when he concludes, "I love freedom and air over the fresh soil." He encourages us to look at things in a new, fresh way, to observe them and analyze them without any bias. Learning through observation is truly the most natural way to learn anything. If you watch any animal, particularly any mammal, this is how they live. Sure, animals have also instincts, and the older the animal is from the evolutionary perspective, the more it relies on these. But as human beings have been given something called consciousness, our potential to gain applicable knowledge through observation is much greater. Approximately 2300 years ago, Aristotle was a mentor and personal teacher of Alexander the Great. Even back then, observation was considered the holy grail of learning, predominantly for its long-lasting effects. The bottom line is, the things we have learned through observation tend to stay much longer in our memory than the information gained by memorization. However, observation is a very complex process that includes several steps, which we'll discuss in the next video. So what's the main takeaway from this part? Memorization can be awesome to train the brain's capacity to store information, but it shouldn't be regarded as the most effective way of learning. Instead, try to slow down, observe things, find the logic that connects the dots together, and let the insight sink in. Or, as Nietzsche would say, learn by heart. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe to gain new self-knowledge and comment below whatever is on your mind. See you soon, fellow thinker.